Picture the scene: children on the White House lawn, Easter decorations, holiday music in the background, cameras rolling, and the President of the United States says the people of Iran are most unhappy when the bombs stop. That is not a side detail in this story. That is the story. Because wars do not reveal themselves only through missiles, maps, or leaked diplomatic proposals. They reveal themselves through the language. Leaders are forced to use once reality stops obeying the script they wanted. And when a leader starts claiming that a population under bombardment actually wants more bombardment, you are no longer watching a confident operation. You are watching political language detached from ordinary human logic in real time. That is the frame I want to use tonight, because it pulls the entire document into focus. At the center of this story is one simple fact. The public narrative coming from Washington said a ceasefire might be close, while the underlying reality described in the source material says the war was not moving toward peace at all. It was moving toward a harder, harsher, more dangerous phase. Iran did not say, we are not close. Iran did not say, let us discuss your terms. Iran sent back terms so broad and immovable that the message was obvious. If you want this war to end, you are not ending it on the architecture Donald Trump wants. End all regional fighting. Give security guarantees across the Iranian-aligned regional network. Lift sanctions. Pay reparations. Accept permanent Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz with a toll system. Forget any fantasy of Iran surrendering ballistic missiles, Shah drones, or major weapon systems. That answer matters not only because of what it demands, but because of what it destroys. It destroys the idea that the other side is psychologically preparing to climb down. It destroys the idea that a temporary pause is just waiting for signatures. And it destroys the idea that public optimism about diplomacy can be taken at face value. Now rewind a few hours. A report surfaces that the United States, Iran, and regional mediators are discussing a possible 45-day ceasefire. The implication is clear. Maybe there is an off-ramp. Maybe there is progress. Maybe all of this noise is heading somewhere orderly, but in war, timing is evidence. When an encouraging headline appears right before markets open, and then rapidly weakens under scrutiny, you have to ask whether the headline was describing reality or trying to condition it. Because almost immediately, we hear that the supposed ceasefire concept is only one of many ideas, that the president has not approved it, and that military operations are continuing. So within hours, we move from maybe peace is near to no. The war is still very much alive. And then Trump steps in front of cameras and makes the contradiction total. He says, the Iranian people want the bombing. He says they are unhappy when the bombing stops. He says, if Iran refuses his demands, you will have to watch what happens. He says Iran has been obliterated. Then, in nearly the same breath, he acknowledges missiles, drones, and helicopters coming back with bullet holes. That is a breakdown in narrative discipline. And breakdowns like that are not cosmetic. They are strategic clues. Because what is he really saying? He is saying victory is complete, except the war is not over. He is saying Iran cannot fight back, except there is still incoming danger. He is saying the pressure is working, except Iran is not accepting his framework. He is saying peace is possible, except he also wants to keep going. The words do not line up because the underlying situation does not line up. And when the words stop lining up, power starts exposing its anxiety. The document gives us another revealing fragment. Trump talks about sending guns to a group that was supposed to help, only for that group to keep the weapons for itself. I do not need to speculate beyond the source to tell you why that is important. In the middle of a war, even he is describing channels of influence that sound leaky, undisciplined, and unreliable. Not a clean machine, not a locked chain of command. Something looser, something messier, something that can produce blowback. Then there is another sentence that should set off alarms. He says the United States could leave now and it would take around 15 years to rebuild. But he wants to finish it up. Listen carefully to the hidden admission. If the option to stop exists, and the decision is still to continue, then continuation is not being driven only by necessity. It is being driven by the desire to impose a more complete ending than the battlefield has actually delivered. That is when wars become very dangerous, because the objective quietly shifts from neutralizing a threat to preventing a political embarrassment. And leaders will often risk much more to avoid humiliation than they initially claimed they would risk to solve the original problem. Now look at what is happening on the ground while these words are being spoken. South Pars is struck again, multiple explosions. Iran's largest petrochemical facility, according to the source, around 85% of Iran's petrochemical exports are tied to that facility. This is where the map starts to matter more than the speech. South Pars is entangled with the energy geography, shared with Qatar's northern field. So when you hit that zone, you are not merely damaging a symbol inside Iran. You are signaling vulnerability inside one of the most sensitive energy corridors on Earth. The war begins to lean outward toward markets, toward shipping routes, toward energy pricing, toward regional retaliation that does not stay in one neat national box. Then the next image, Sharif University of Technology, is hit. Not a rumor, not a metaphor. A top engineering university, labs, buildings, mosque, data center, nearby gas facility. A place identified in the source as the MIT of Iran. A place associated with engineers, scientists, aerospace talent, advanced research, technical elites. Why does that matter? Because when a war starts reaching into universities, data centers, and civilian adjacent technical infrastructure, it is no longer only punishing present military capacity. It is reaching for the human and institutional machinery that produces the future. It is saying this is not only about the next strike, it is about the next decade. And once a war starts speaking in decades, do not call it controlled. Then another layer of escalation arrives. The head of IRGC intelligence is killed. There is discussion of authorization to strike all Iranian energy facilities. Read that slowly. All energy facilities. If the latter reaches that rung, then the story is no longer whether one side can pressure the other. The story becomes whether anyone in power still has a realistic off-ramp that does not involve wider economic shock and regional destabilization. Now add one more element, because it tells you where the moral center of this is drifting. Trump says that if it were up to him, he would like to keep the oil. There it is, under the language of national security, under the language of pressure, under the language of peace, through strength. The material temptation appears in plain view. And once that sentence is spoken aloud, everyone listening understands that the war can no longer be explained as a narrow technical operation. The ambitions are spilling out. The justifications are widening. The line between defeating a threat and extracting an outcome is becoming harder to hide. So let me compress the whole document into one judgment. This is not a story about a ceasefire being delayed. It is a story about a war narrative breaking apart in public, while the actual conflict expands across infrastructure, institutions, energy, and rhetoric. Iran is refusing surrender language. Trump is speaking with increasing contradiction. The battlefield is still producing evidence of resistance. The target set is widening. The economic risk is rising. And the words used to sell the war are becoming more extreme precisely because the clean ending has not arrived. That is why I began with the Easter lawn. Not because it is theatrical, though it is. Not because it is surreal, though it is, but because it captures the core truth of the entire piece. When power can no longer persuade you that bombs mean peace, it starts demanding that you accept absurdity as strategy. I do not accept that. And I think the document itself does not allow you to accept it either, because every major element in it points in the same direction. The ceasefire talk weakens, Iran hardens, Trump threatens, contradictions multiply. Energy infrastructure is hit, elite institutions are hit, senior figures are targeted, more authorization is discussed. The war does not narrow, it broadens. So the question now is not whether someone can still produce another headline about a possible pause. The real question is much uglier. How much more of the region has to be placed at risk before the people driving this stop, pretending they are one announcement away from control? Because once a war reaches the point where public language sounds detached from reality, what usually follows is not clarity. What follows is a larger attempt to force reality to obey. And that is the moment when the price gets much higher for everybody.